Good morning, this is Alicia Cerretani, and I'm joined by Lyndon LaRouche. Now, yesterday we left you with a review of the week that was. And as you had said, the week that wasn't simply a downgrade here, a crisis there, a development over here. What it was what was set into motion with the assassination of both of the Kennedys. So that is actually the space in which the current developments are unfolding. Because the fact of the matter is, nothing has been done to reverse that trend in any meaningful way, particularly here from the United States. And therefore that is the week that was, and that is essentially, until something changes in a profound way, the week that will be. And that's what we want to discuss this morning, is what we have in front of us, knowing what we're coming out of, what we're coming from, getting a sense of the week that will be.
Yes, precisely, I would say. We're now at the greatest crisis in history of mankind, because for the first time, and it is a known history of mankind, there was earlier periods that we don't know too much about. We can't quote them on what their opinions were, though we see refractions of that. The human being is actually a unique as a creative species. And only people who have understood what creativity is, as very few Americans today have a chance of understanding that. They don't have the experience that would back up the idea of what true creativity is. People invent all kinds of words for creativity, all kinds of meanings, but they're not relevant. A few people have. And a few people have carried civilization so far, those who were creative. Names like Einstein, the great Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, These are the creative personalities, the prototypes, the people who live in the domain of the imagination, the creative imagination, in the domain of metaphor, like Shelley's expression of the idea of metaphor. That's creativity. But what the human species, unlike any other species, because we are creative, potentially creative, we're born with that creative potential. We're born with a divine quality embedded in us if we develop it and realize it and enjoy it. And if so, we have the power to make discoveries. The first discoveries, really the most important, the most crucial, are classic artistic composition, various forms. Because the human mind, which is the creative part, is fascinated with things like metaphor, in music, in all kinds of media. The way the mind plays with ideas, the creative mind plays with ideas. This practice of the creative mind is seeking truth. It's learning how to have a disciplined conception of what truth is, and then applying that truth, which becomes known as science. But science is not still born. It's not just born. What's born is the creative power of imagination, which only the human species demonstrates. Because we use this power of creativity and use it and develop it to higher degrees, mankind, unlike every other species that we know of, is ultimately doomed to termination as a species. Mankind is the only species that is immune from a necessary death. All the things that were killed, all the whole species, 95% or more, even 98% or more, of all known living species are presently extinct. And they were each extinct in a row which went generally lined along the lines of higher to lower forms of organization of life. Mm-hmm. Now, the universe also demonstrates to us by the study of the history of living processes within the nearly first 500 million years or so, demonstrates that the change of species is from lower forms of life to higher forms of organization of life. And the dead species are those which failed to pass the test of examination for the next promotion. Mankind is different because mankind is creative. The other species are not creative. Their creativity exists, but it's built into them, like a program. And when their time comes, they pass away. Why? Because the requirement becomes a higher form of life. Mankind achieves a higher form of life through discoveries tantamount to universal physical principles and invests in those principles. This requires always an increase in the energy flux density of power that mankind uses. And therefore, those who want to go back to the Stone Age, like our greenies, are actually themselves a self-doomed species, subspecies of humanity. The part of humanity that's committed a suicide pact, a species suicide pact, with greenism. The greenie is the greatest threat to mankind today, because other forms of mankind may be ignorant of truth. But the greenie is a willful enemy of truth. And for that crime, the greenie is going to be exterminated in the course of time of great kills. Whereas those of us who are committed in society to scientific and technological progress, as we use the term today, are going to succeed, provided that their conception of scientific progress is based on the classical artistic imagination. And that's what we've lost.
Yeah, that's the problem today, is that we haven't had that quality of commitment to scientific development in several decades. And what we have had, as exemplified with the space shuttle, has been lost. It's just been put aside, at least for the time being now, until it's revived by a species who knows that it's in their best interest to get this thing going again. But that's essentially, I mean, there are problems, there are immediate problems, practical problems, but that seems to be the real issue at hand with when you're talking about raising different generations to have an identity and a mission orientation. If there isn't a practical expression of that which makes you a species in your government and in your culture, you're gonna have a problem. It's gonna be a very big problem. So there's all this discussion now about, creating more jobs, youth unemployment, the culture of death, with whether it's video games or what you're seeing with these mass shootings. And there's all these questions, but you're not going to answer them taking them head on. You have to go back and locate what these things are. These things are human beings, and they have a very particular role. And I think that's just to be honest, that's our role as an organization, is to bring that back into the political discussion. And we're gonna set the foundation for it right now, because I don't care what people's opinion is about the universe. The universe is doing what it's doing. We know a little bit about it. We're learning more. But the fact of the matter is, we are now in a position where we're experiencing a higher level of cosmic radiation. We know very little about it. We need to know more. But at this point, everybody's going to have to become an expert one way or another on what we are as a species. Everybody, from just because it's going to become more and more the defining factor of the world that we live in.
Yes. Well, this can be made even more precise, actually, because what we depend upon is what we call the equivalent of technological and scientific progress. Now, what I always emphasize is that's not to assume that mathematical physics as such is the driver. It is not. What we've seen in the post-war period, at which point the British influence moved in with assets like Truman and that crowd, and it moved in to destroy the intention of Franklin Roosevelt and really of our entire American system, and really the best intention of European cultures and other cultures. So what we've done is we have destroyed the necessary advances of the human imagination as expressed through science into higher orders of technology. For example, we pass through various kinds of fire. Now, the difference between mankind and all other animals, in the simplest expression, is fire. Mankind is the only species that willfully uses fire to enhance the existence of mankind. The increase of population, the maintenance of population, depends upon increasing reliance on the use of fire. And fire goes from charcoal and things like that up to petroleum, past coke and coal and petroleum, and then get to the entry where the continued existence of mankind now today depends on not only on nuclear power, nuclear fission as a power, but thermonuclear fusion as a power, looking forward to antimatter reactions. It's now Riemannian science. It's now Venanskian science. Mm-hmm. If we don't progress to those levels, human beings are going to become extinct. And it's going to be a horrible death for all of them. So therefore you want to avoid that. Now why do we have this crazy belief? Everybody who studies mankind knows that fire and the increase in the concentration of power of fire is the basis for the possible existence of the human species. That the human species is absolutely unique in this characteristic. And it's the human mind, essentially what becomes the scientific mind, which enables us to survive as a species. Those who want to take us back to the Stone Age, like the green people, well, you say, where do they come from? Where do these crazy greenies come from? They're anti-human. They hate the human species. They hate the essential characteristic of the human species. They try to put out fires. And we say we have to control fires, not put them out. So what's the answer? There has been, in European civilization in particular, for a long period of time, which is making most conspicuous as an organization with the rise of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire gave the idea that mankind in general are cattle, and to be used as cattle, raised as cattle, and killed as cattle, while only a small oligarchical privileged group was supposed to be made comfortable and play with people as if they were animals, and slaughter them when they no longer wanted them around. And so we have the oligarchical principle. This is something which is well known in all classical history. This is the so-called Prometheus versus Zeus issue. Mm-hmm. And that's where the killer is. So we have people like the British monarchy, like similar kinds of bodies, which are the oligarchical principle, who believe that the world should be run by money. Now, money has no intrinsic value. Money is given value only by, that is relative value, only by productivity. The increase of man's use of fire at a higher energy flux density. That's the very basis of value in economy. What man can turn his imagination into product and turn that into the conditions of life of expanded opportunities for mankind. The ability to explore nearby space, to begin to discover how the galaxy determines life on Earth, and what we must do about that. These are the questions which must be faced. And we must scrap entirely and rid ourselves entirely of those people who want to kill people. People are precious, and people's development is precious. And we have taken away from people with means such as the assassination of Jack Kennedy, which we know was done by Anglo-American interests, not some kook down in Texas. And it was a lie. The Warren Commission was a damn lie. Just like the 9/11 story is a damn lie, which the current president just buried still deeper. The truth of the thing has been buried by him, that liar, that pervert. And so the issue is, these are the natures of the issue of the future. Are we willing to stand up to the power of a moneyed oligarchy, which is a result of the oligarchical system against which this country was founded in a revolution against the European system that was an oligarchical system? We have compelled the use by the United States. We in the United States, by representing this, have been the oppressor of the oligarchy, because we were a powerful nation which threatened the oligarchy, and they had to invest in progress because they couldn't get by without it. So therefore, now they try to take it all away from us. They're out to kill the human species. And I am by conviction a slayer of oligarchs. because they are the greatest threat to the human species. And we have to have a population with guts. I mean, real guts, not these cowards we have in the Senate and House now. Guts to stand up against the oligarchy, against Wall Street, against London, the city of London. We have to stand up for the people of the United States and for the intention on which this nation was founded. We have to reaffirm the oath to the Constitution of the United States, which these guys have violated like whores for a price. That's the real issue. Therefore, there's this scientific aspect lurking there. The possibility of human existence, continued human existence, depends on the power of invention. The invention involved with fundamental physical principles of operation. That has been killed. The green disease, the green mental disease, the green syphilis has taken over. And we have to take it back. And anyone who is not ready to take it back is guilty of a crime against all humanity. They're putting the human species' existence into doubt. That's what this filthy excuse for a president has done. That's what the British oligarchy has done, the British monarchy in particular. To kill people. Look, the British monarchy, in its person, has said we must reduce the world's population to not more than 2 billion people. Now they've lowered the gate to 1 billion people. And the intention of the British monarchy and other people like that, the greenies, is to reduce the human species from 7 billion to 1 billion in a very short time. And what do you think is happening to us today? Exactly that. What is this president doing? Exactly that. He's an enemy of humanity. Like the British monarchy. The enemy of humanity, the avowed enemy of humanity. If somebody comes out and says, we're going to kill, you got 7 billion people. We're going to kill 6 of them. Now that makes Hitler look like a piker, doesn't it? And that we have to stand on the fact we are the United States. We have a constitution. All we have to do is adhere to and enforce our constitution as our system of government. And we're free. And I can give me the power for 24 hours. I'll free this nation simply by giving it back its constitution in a practical form, practical measures of that.
I think that's the point, is that any serious resistance to what's happening right now, what's obviously happening in the United States and across the planet, the only serious resistance is the confidence in what man is as a species. Because look what's happening right now. You have Congress people and others throughout the country who are, say, backing Glass-Steagall. But do they have the same commitment? Are they ready to confront an enemy that's going to lower the population by 6 billion people? No. Are they standing on the Glass-Steagall because it's the obvious practical thing to do? Yes. Fact of the matter is, that's not going to work. That's not going to suffice to actually take care of people. Mm-hmm. So any practical considerations that people are considering in terms of good intentions are only lasting and only effective if they come from a greater passion of, and it's a process of discovery of what we are as a species, what we're capable of, what we have yet to discover. That's got to be the backing for any sort of practical emergency measures right now. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Well, you know, this other thing, another aspect of this is Christianity. The impetus for what became the United States was Christianity. I mean, where else did we have the effective opposition to the oligarchical system? It was Christians who died and were killed en masse by the Roman Empire, who demonstrate what the issue is. The issue is, as then as it is now, the nature of humanity against the oligarchical system, which is represented today by the British monarchy in person and by people of similar disposition. We have to fight to free our people from this great atrocity which monsters and depraved people like this President Obama are out to murder Americans en masse. That's what he's dedicated to. And people are still cheering him, still accepting his leadership. Well, this is the, and we have before us beautiful things to do. For example, let's take the present weather system, a perfect example. And look at the NWAPA project. And now look at what happened with the water systems in the northern belt of the Missouri, Ohio, and Mississippi River, that area. Look what happened. Now look at another part of the United States which suddenly had a drought area against this surplus area. Why don't we have NWAPA in process? NWAPA would gather out the waters of the waters which otherwise just go directly into the ocean, do not pass much of the land. We take that water, we put that water into a reservoir system, a pumping and reservoir system. We now then connect these parts with the Rocky Mountain area and down from Alaska. We connect these parts to river systems like the existing major. We build canalways and other kinds of pumping stations. Now we find we can take the water, which falls on the North American area, which is enough for the whole area, for all needs. But it's not always in the right place. So NWAPA means we're going to do, first of all, we're going to put the water in the right place by developing a system of making the flows of the surplus water flow into the areas where you have a deficit. And that's the way to solve this problem here. We not only do that, but we increase the amount of water effectively available because the rainfall circulation. Instead of just letting the water flow into the ocean, cause rainfall. And the rainfall will build up your reservoir system. You will have a higher level. We can take the whole area of this whole belt of the Central Great Plains area, which is now being drained by pumping down to zero. We're losing our water unnecessarily. Now, I would say the first project to list at the top of the agenda for the United States is NWAPA. Start to install it now. The work you will do will more than pay for itself. You will also restore industry. You'll restore by the means you have to use to develop this system. You will revive Detroit. You revive the whole area, that whole area below the Great Lakes. You revive other areas. By getting the water management in there, you're going to find you're going to save great areas. You're going to increase the water resources in those plains area. Suddenly you're going to find where you have poverty and waste. And the rainfall patterns will increase the amount of rainfall, water passing through the system several times. All these things will work.
It's also the only way to get a working financial system, is on the basis of physical production.
Yes, which means that kind of a system, an American system,
right.
A credit system. Eliminate money as a system. You use nominal money, but not as monetary assets. What you do is you keep federal credit and other forms of credit which are supported by federal credit, like private banks that are doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you simply create the production, finance the production, which employs people in useful work, which moves us forward, and you find that we're moving from an area of destitution back into an area that means something for the future. And the future is what's so important. The key thing that defines the future is actually scientific progress and related progress. And also the classical imagination, the artistic imagination, which inspires and causes scientific progress.
Right.
And that's the thing that's the driver, where people feel the pleasure of exercising creativity, know that what they're doing is worth what they're doing, and having that kind of satisfaction. But also, the crucial thing is the discovery of great artistic compositions and scientific compositions, because these things are universal values. They're principles, they're not just objects. And they define the way that mankind increases his power. Now, when we make a discovery, like a great artistic composition, which expresses a principle, or a scientific proposition, which expresses a principle, the person who invents this discovery actually becomes, in a sense, immortal. Because even though they die, what they have contributed to the process of increments of man's power in the universe lives on. And we come back to the true question of human motivation. Human motivation is no longer pleasure, simple pleasure, as such. It's now the sense that we are sharing in the benefits of discoveries of principle made by people before us. And that when we die, what we have contributed as principles to this process will live on to the benefit of those who follow us. We then are now become an immortal species, where we each die in time. We may improve somewhat on the performance of life, but we're going to die anyway. So what's the meaning of life? How do you explain the meaning of life in just an individual life? By pleasure? No. By this knowledge that you are participating in the creation of the power of mankind to advance the conditions of mankind and the duties of mankind in the universe. And that connection of the permanent value of unique discoveries of principle. I take the discovery of Riemann, one of my favorite people, to that of others later who followed him. And this is the example. We must find our identity in our role in participating in a creative process which makes and transmits discoveries of principle useful to mankind. That is the intrinsic, implicit meaning of the U.S. federal Constitution, the right to do this, something we saw already in the earlier period in terms of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The same intention. That intention, which is a natural outgrowth of influences such as of Nicholas Acusa, for example. That is us. That is really the American Constitution, the purpose. And that's what we have to realize. We have to realize that sometimes we call beauty, because it is artistic, it's a value. Why? Well, it's a value intrinsically. But if you need to have it proven to you, you will find that discoveries of principle are the source of improvements in man's power to exist. And we can then love one another from generation to generation and say this process of humanity, going from one generation to another, seeking always improvements in the human condition, that is our morality. That's our pleasure. That's our joy.
And that is the week that could be.
Yes, it is the week that could be. We could decide to stop dying and live.
I think there's plenty of people that want to do that.
I'm sure. We just have to get the message out there more broadly.
Mm-hmm. These are the terms.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, and stay tuned to LaRouchePAC.com. There will most certainly be more. Thanks.